All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. Welcome to the Sustainability Speaker Series for the federal community. I'm Michelle Hawkins, Director for Strategic Initiatives in the Office of the Federal Chief Sustainability Officer and in the White House Council on Environmental Quality. So again, thank you for joining us today. And I'm really excited that you're all here today in this hybrid event. In support of the President's Federal Sustainability Plan, this speaker series is designed for federal employees to enhance our climate sustainability literacy, learn more about the President's Federal Sustainability Plan, and our critical role in the shift to more sustainable and resilient operations. So again, I'm really excited. We've got an excellent lineup of speakers for you today. But before I get started and before we dive into the event, I do need to cover a few housekeeping items. The event is being recorded, and the recording, as well as information on future events, can be found on our website at sustainability.gov. If you're watching online, we will not be using the raise hand feature, but we did take all the questions that came in during the registration process, and we used that information to inform today's discussion. So again, thank you all for being here with us. And now I have the honor of introducing the Chair of the Council on Environmental Quality, Brenda Mallory. So Chair Mallory was confirmed by the U.S. Senate on April 14th, 2021, and sworn in as the 12th Chair of the Council on Environmental Quality. She is the first African-American to serve in this position. As chair, she advises the President on environmental and natural resources policies that improve, preserve, and protect public health and the environment for America's communities. She is focused particularly on addressing the environmental justice and climate challenges the nation faces while advancing opportunities for job growth and economic development. Chair Mallory has nearly 4 decades of experience in environmental law and policy and has served in 4 presidential administrations. So let's welcome Chair Mallory to the podium.
Thank you, Michelle, and hello, everyone. So good to see some live faces in person. It's my honor to be here with you today. I want to start off by just thanking all of our federal staff for joining us and sort of taking the time out of their schedules to benefit basically from these programs. This series, I think, is just so tremendously valuable to all of us. And I know it's hard sometimes to break yourself away from your work to participate, but I think you will not regret any time spent today for sure. I also want to just offer a huge thank you to Andrew Mayock, who is our federal government chief sustainability officer, for hosting these impactful series. I know how much effort it takes to do events. Anybody who's done events knows how much effort it takes to do events. And so I'm just thankful for his leadership and also thankful for the team for really spending the time to invest in putting on really good programming. Of course, today, our special guest is someone who really doesn't need introduction, Mr. Al Roker. And so we'll turn it over to Andrew and Al in a moment. But I just want to point out that today's topic, reporting from the front lines of our changing climate, is just incredibly timely. In fact, I probably don't even have to tell you that if you've been watching the news at all. Climate-related disasters impact millions of Americans each year. When roads wash out, power goes down, homes and communities burn, crops fail, and schools flood. In fact, 4 in 10 Americans live in a county that was impacted by a climate disaster last year alone. And right now, we're dealing with impacts from Hurricane Fiona in Puerto Rico, tracking Hurricane Ian in the Gulf Coast, and watching related tropical storms and storm surges in Florida. And the federal government is not immune to the devastating impacts of these extreme weather events. With a footprint of over 300,000 federal buildings, over 600,000 vehicles, and as the nation's largest employer, we face mounting climate-related risk to our physical infrastructure, our operations and programs, and to our workforce, especially those who work outside. That's why President Biden made it his week 1 priority to reinvigorate federal government climate adaptation and resilience planning efforts. He reinforced this priority through his December 2021 Federal Sustainability Plan and Executive Order, and through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. The president secured over $50 billion in resilience investments through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the most in American history, to protect communities against extreme weather. And the Infrastructure Reduction Act, which is the single largest climate investment in US history, includes millions to boost federal adaptation and climate resilience. President Biden is moving full steam ahead. He knows there is more work to do to meet the urgency of the climate crisis. So back to where I started, millions of Americans are feeling the devastating impacts of climate change. Al Roker has seen this too often. As the head of the NBC News Climate Unit and longtime weatherman and anchor of NBC's Today show, his work has documented across the country and even across the world how climate change is impacting lives and livelihoods. I'm really looking forward to hearing Mr. Roker's presentation today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Andrew Mayock to get the program started. Andrew?
Welcome, Al Roker. Yes.
Wow, thanks so much for that really tepid response. That was fantastic.
And as we kick it off here, as we've done in other federal speaker series, we want to do a little scene setting, building on Brenda's words, setting up and noting where we are today. We're in a time of records, record heat, record drought, record flooding, record damage, a time of urgency to respond to that, of course. And while those are all daunting and difficult, it's also a time of positive records too, as Brenda was also pointing out, a time of record climate legislation, a time of record green jobs, a time of record solar and wind installation, and all the things that we need to do to combat the first series of records. So we're excited here today to focus on that first series of records and the challenges that we face, and a really compelling set of materials today, and most of all, speaker today, in setting the scene for the federal sustainability and the work that we're doing throughout the agencies. We've got a couple slides that we share as we begin here. If we go to the next slide, I want to say a few words about where we are and where we're headed. Number one is where we are is broadcasting live from the White House today. Excited to be here with our White House colleagues from all the policy offices, CEA, DPC, NEC, NSC, OMB, OSTP, and all the alphabet. We work with them closely to go deliver on the federal sustainability plan on behalf of the president, working closely also, of course, with our agency colleagues. Moving to the next slide. We put out a very ambitious sustainability plan. I won't go through this slide, but welcome you to sustainability.gov, where you can see the mandate that the president has given us to do things like electrify that fleet of over 600,000 vehicles that Brendan mentioned, and also reduce emissions dramatically in those 300,000 plus buildings. Do that while also taking care to that bottom circle, making ourselves climate resilient in our operations and our infrastructure. Next slide. We've got, this isn't about the next 30 years of action, no, this is about next decade of action, and really this next year, this immediate moment that we're in and how we're addressing it. So we're very focused on the present. Next. And in focusing on the present, we've got a lot to show for. We won't go into detail in it here. We'll have future sessions to do that, but making significant progress across a number of our key initiatives here. For example, you can see Secretary Buttigieg, GSA Administrator Carnahan, and National Climate Advisor Zaidi just a couple of weeks ago on the ground in Ohio at a plant that is dramatically reducing GHG emissions as they produce the product that goes into making steel, that goes into making vehicles in the United States. We've got, of course, the president here, who, as we saw recently, the Detroit Auto Show, leaning in fully on one of his labors of love in transforming the US auto industry. With that, I think we've come to the last slide. And the president, there's a reminder slide, the letter that the president sent to all of us as federal employees to whether your full-time job is in a chief sustainability office or as a frontline energy manager or a fleet manager, or whether your job is more adjacent, we all have a duty to lean in, pitch in, and deliver. And we all have a need to do that right now. Next. That guy looks familiar. Do you know him?
Thanks.
So today we're doing what you're about to live and experience, which is to educate, inspire, and discuss where we are and where we're headed. Last slide. Again, an encouragement to find out more information at sustainability.gov, where you can see other federal speaker series like this one as well, in case you missed one, and lots of information on what the plan is and what kind of progress we're making against the plan. And without further ado, we will move on to the main event. Thank you again for joining us today. As I was telling you on your way in, the White House in general is a place that has a lot of energy coming off the Inflation Reduction Act success and number of successes that Brenda noted as well. And we're even more excited today to have you here and to have you sharing what you're sharing. And this goes to the heart of what we're trying to do today, which is to really learn about this moment that we're in so we can act on this moment that we're in. So welcome, Al. Thank you for today.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here and I'm very honored to be here. Thank you so much. This is something that we have been at NBC News have been really, I think, at the forefront of. Our unit, our NBC News unit, which is run by Aaron McGarry right over there. We started out, like everybody, covering weather, but over the last 12 years, we have realized that this is, I think, the greatest existential threat to us, not just as a country, but I think as a planet. And so we've really been trying to lean into that to not just say doom and gloom, but here are some of the solutions and some of the things we can all do to kind of move this forward. But I do think that, when we first started, I think like a lot of people, both in politics and in private sector, they weren't sure that, this is something that people care about. But I think as we've gone forward, I think the general public is very concerned about this. They care about it. It's something that's important to them because in the end, they know it affects their families, it affects their livelihoods, it affects their health. And so that's what we're dealing with. And so part of the things I think to help set that up is to give a sense of what we're doing. And I think the importance of having a meeting like this, not just for the folks who are in the room, but all the federal employees and stakeholders across the country, I think really need to know what's going on. And part of it is about information. If people know what we're talking about, then I think, and as we continue to talk about it, I think that goes a long way because of as you as federal employees, but also as U.S. citizens know what's happening. I think that goes a long way. And we've got some graphics here that if we can pop that up because as there's a kind of a nexus, if you will. There we go. Of understanding. And so, this climate connection, you have to make this connection. So the idea, the ability to influence people and their attitudes about global warming, and then how well is that influence understood? So the need to understand and follow the science. So we start with severe convective storms, wildfires, tropical cyclones, extreme snow. People are a little less understanding of that. But as you get toward more simple concepts, droughts, heavy rain, and then extreme heat and extreme cold, people kind of make those connections. So it's our job to help people understand that. And so one of the things I think at the end of the day, dollars and cents and impacts make a big difference. For example, 2022, we've had 9 events that have cost over $1 billion. 9 events. The yearly average is 8. We've had Western plains and drought, the severe weather back in April, in June, and May. We had hailstorms in May, tornado outbreaks in March and April in the Southeast, and a derecho, that long-lasting line of thunderstorms, come through. And it's kind of incredible when you think about it. The disaster count so far to date, 5th highest on record, Andy. And we continue to watch this. Now, 2020 and 2021, the most number of billion-dollar events, and it's been growing steadily over the last decades. 1980s, we had 31, 90s, 55, 67 in the 2000 aughts. In the 20 teens, we had 128, and so far in the 2020s, we're already at 51. So we're seeing more extreme weather, more events, and I think the average person is starting to understand that there's a direct correlation between what we're seeing and what they're seeing and feeling and having to deal with and pay for, and the climate connection.
Can you build on that a little bit, Alice, to what you're seeing as far as the public that you engage on a regular basis and their recognition and understanding of that? What kind of cycle have you seen on the ground and awareness? How has that grown, and how does that show up for you?
When we go out to cover these disasters, and I've covered a fair number of tornadoes and hurricanes, snowstorms, and more people come to us while we're in between hits on the Today Show or covering for MSNBC or CNBC, and they say, I don't remember it being like this. I don't remember. I grew up. I don't remember this. And people who are my age, who are somewhere about alive when the earth cooled, saying, I've lived here all my life. I've never seen this. And so, I think there's been a trend to try to politicize this. And I think this is beyond politics. This isn't about red or blue or anything like this. This is about all of us and everybody. And I think it's moved beyond that. And I think people are realizing, both we average Americans and folks who are in government, especially elected officials, I think are starting to realize that people care about this, and they, this affects their homes. The number of people who have lived in areas, floodplains, or in what we used to call Tornado Alley, which is shifting, as we'll see in a little bit. They've seen it, but they said it's happening too much. I've got to move. I've got to go somewhere. Well, where do you go? And I think people are realizing that.
And from a time perspective, just taking a look at this chart, do you think it's as you think back on your work in this, just in the last 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, where critical mass tipping point of public awareness has occurred?
Yes, absolutely. I think people, certainly, I think the preponderance of people accept the science and accept that something's happened. And B, I think they want action. I think they expect it from their local, state, and federal officials, and that they want us to do something, and that's why I was always worried, and I think to a certain extent, and my management has always been, our NBC News management has been extremely supportive, but there's always been kind of a concern: are people going to understand this? Are they going to buy into it? And they absolutely do. And now I think people expect this, because they our job is not to create connections where there aren't. We only will tell people, hey, we can make this connection between climate science and what is happening. We don't force it. We don't, because that's almost as bad as not doing anything.
Yeah.
So and in fact, you talk about heat. This is really kind of crazy. In September, we had this record heat wave with temperatures that were crazy. I mean, more than 1,700 daily records, highs across 12 states. In September, 320 record highs, 12 all-time record highs broken. You look in California, Ukiah, Santa Rosa, Sacramento, Merced, San Jose, Napa, all with the highest temperatures ever recorded. Napa, where we, I mean, I don't know. This looks like a group that probably has a glass of wine or two. It's changing the way wine growers have to affect this. And I was just, our daughter lives in Paris and we were in France. And there's just an article in the New York Times yesterday about how wine growers in France are going to have to, they're actually opening up what kind of varieties of grapes they'll allow, because the current crops are not heat resistant. And that's, and we're running into those issues. And of course, you know, when you talk about agriculture, especially California, but other parts of this country, but especially California, Lake Mead, which is one of the major water sources out there, July 2000, it was at near maximum capacity, 1,200 feet of water. Well, July of this year, it's only at 27% of capacity. I mean, that's really pretty astounding when you think about it. You look, and when we put it into, you get an idea of how far down the water levels. This is the driest period, 22-year period in 1,200 years. And I ought to know because I was around then. So, so you know, and you know, these are bread and butter issues. You know, we talk about you know, food costs and things like this. This directly affects our ability to grow crops and where they're grown and how long they're grown.
Yeah, it really hits home to the work that we're involved here from a federal agency perspective. In that one of the first things the president did, as Brenda was noting too, in that first week, said, go execute a whole of government effort on climate change and make sure we bring back our adaptation and resilience capability. And the agencies then were tasked to move out quickly within 120 days, report on our vulnerabilities, and most importantly, what actions we're going to take regarding heat, drought, regarding employees, regarding infrastructure to address that. And so agencies executed on that work in 2021, and we announced the initial findings a year ago this time, and we're excited next week to show the progress report and an update on what agencies have done in that time period to make sure that we can be as adaptive and as resilient as possible against these very extraordinary challenges. Speaking of adapting and becoming more resilient, what are you seeing in addition to seeing this weather and the effects on the climate take hold? What are you seeing from a public sector, private sector action perspective to adjust to these?
You know, I think, for example, when it comes to water and drought, in fact, I was just at a seminar, moderated something with the folks from water.org and Amazon, and they are working together to provide microloans, not just here in America, but also in other places around the world, because, you know, we take for granted, you turn on the spigot and water, fresh water, drinkable water comes out. Well, in a number of places, not just around the world, but especially out west, that is not taken for granted. And so people have to, you know, spend time and energy and money to find drinkable water. And so a number of organizations are partnering with water.org, which is a nonprofit organization, to make sure people not just can not only, you know, get money to drill new wells and to have safe drinkable water, but to make sure that, you know, as they go forward, because water is really, in a sense, the gold standard of how we live and how we conduct our lives. Water is a crucial part of every country's economy, and so we're seeing more and more of these. You know, that it's a government, private equity, private business, and non-government organizations coming together to make sure, you know, that our populations all across the country and the world. And the fact is, many of these communities, not just here but around the world, are communities of color that suffer a higher degree of the impacts on this. So those partnerships are crucial, because no one group can do it by themselves.
Absolutely. And it's one thing we're seeing as the reports come in last year and then the action items that come in next week is, you know, agency after agency making some dramatic changes, particularly those who are stationed out west, and how they're handling and managing their water. So in addition to making sure that we reduce GHG emissions throughout the federal footprint, other key aspects of sustainability are built in, water being one critical one.
Yeah, and that's the other, we talk about, you're talking, let's stay out west,
Mhm.
wildfires and climate change. I mean, not only does it affect people's livelihoods, their lives, businesses, but it affects air quality. There's a recent study that showed all the progress that we've made in air quality improvements have all been but erased because of wildfires. And since 1970, wildfire season is now about 105 days longer on average. The annual number of large fires has more than tripled. And per year since 1970, 6 times as many acres have burned on average. And that's, we've got all this warm water, the warmer waters are making these massive cyclones, these low pressure systems that what we do call going through bombogenesis, creating bomb cyclones, these larger clashes between warm water and cold air masses, and those are disrupting our water flows. And the problem is we're seeing these systems now, let's forget about hurricanes right now. Let's just talk about everyday storms. As we get a degree of warming in the atmosphere, for every 1 degree, our atmosphere can hold 4% more water. And that means we're going to see stronger and stronger storms. And so rainstorms, snowstorms are much more likely to become larger events, which taxes resources governmentally, private sector, across the board. We're, in general, our major rain events are producing 30% more rain than they were in the 1970s.
Mhm. Some really profound videos and statistics up there. I think that is in part answers my next question, but also looking forward to how you answer this question that people come to us from our White House policy office colleagues, our agency colleagues, and say, how do we communicate well a very complex situation in a compelling way to our stakeholders, the public, to our colleagues in the agencies? What kind of advice would you give us?
I think appeal to people's better judgment, that I think they know intrinsically that something is going on. And as best you can, as federal agencies, gather as much information, but meat and potatoes, in a sense, information. You're seeing this, you used to see this, and now you're seeing this. And you can, some people may argue, well, that we don't know that this is a human connection. Well, I'm not going to get into that argument with you. If you want to believe that, fine. But there is something happening, and it has continued to happen. And we can argue about what's causing it, but the fact is it's happening. And I think the more basic information, there's a term we used to use in local news called news you can use. So if this is information that, puts down in fairly simple terms, and I'm not talking about talking down to people, I'm just talking about making things as understandable as possible. And once they see it in black and white, I mean, yes, there are some people who question facts, and you're never going to reach those people. But I think most people are fairly rational and understand that things are changing. And especially, and as opposed to, yeah, I think there's something going on, as opposed to, oh yeah, there is something going on, as best you can with each individual agency and or agencies that are put together. I think, I think everybody looks at, for example, our military as one of the things that we can all get behind. Well, the fact of the matter is, the Department of Defense has said climate change is the #1 threat to Homeland Security. I think there was something like 70% of military facilities are somewhat affected by climate change. That's pretty astounding. And I think when people hear that, I think that's one of those, oh, gee, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Moments.
And they indeed are a leader, have continued to be a leader. And one of the ways that they've shown that is they came up in the last 2 years with a very rigorous climate assessment tool to make sure that when they are building new bases, adjusting existing bases. They've got an accurate depiction of their physical infrastructure as well as the impacts that may come along due to the impacts of climate. And they're now sharing that with the rest of the federal government and actually the rest of the world. So really strong agency and entity on that leadership front.
And now we're talking about hurricanes. And I think we all know, we've been talking about the two words I know myself, I've been using more often than I ever have in the last 2 years is rapid intensification. These storms are now what was considered a run-of-the-mill hurricane, a Category 1 storm or something like that. These warmer waters, ocean waters, for example, the Gulf right now, where Ian is churning, is on average 5 degrees warmer than average. And those warmer waters is the fuel for these storms. And so wetter, warmer hurricanes are going to cause for more extreme rainfall events. Right now, I mean, as we started tracking this, we were first thinking maybe 4 to 6 inches, 8 to 10. We're now up to, for parts of central Florida, talking about, and this was as of a couple of hours ago, as of 8 a.m., 24 inches of rain possible.
Wow.
And what we're seeing is, and this is going to happen with Ian, it's going to probably slow down to the speed that most adults can walk, 3 to 4 miles per hour, which means that's a longer duration to pummel those areas. And we're seeing these storms lasting longer going north. Fiona, for example, just pummeled Canada. It was the strongest storm. It was a post-tropical storm, but for all intents and purposes, hurricane, very much like Sandy, post-tropical. Strongest storm they've ever had. Fortunately, they only lost 1 life, but millions and millions of dollars of damage. 3,500 Canadian Armed Forces called out to help. I mean, it really is incredible. And we were talking about tornadoes. Because of a warming climate, we're actually seeing what was the traditional tornado alley shifting to the east and north into more highly populated areas. So, and going back to the hurricanes for just a moment, a lot of people think, oh, well, I live along a coast. I don't live along a coast, so I don't really care. Well, the fact of the matter is these hurricanes now, because in their post-tropical life, have so much moisture associated, as they go inland, they're causing as much, if not more damage than what happened, when they were actually tropical storms, tropical systems. So this is having a domino effect because of a warming climate now.
Yeah, it really ups the premium as we harden our federal infrastructure to make sure we have this kind of rigor when it comes to data on our implementation. A lot of the planning in the past, as you well know, was spent on saying what happened in the last 100 years. And our inability now to look at the last 100 years, our need to look at the last 5 years, and also project that extrapolate that into the next 20, 30 years, those experiences.
And the problem is, we look at these, they're going to have to start reassessing. We talk about 1 in 1,000 year storms, but they're happening more frequently. So are they 1 in 1,000 storms anymore? And that's the, I don't even understand. I don't envy you folks to have to implement this, because you're having to, your predecessors looked at data that was fairly stable over a period of time. Well, it's changing as you are writing policy. And so you've got to really be very nimble and look at stuff as open-ended in a way.
Yeah. There's a role for everyone in this room and online to play in the federal sustainability plan. And it's a common occurrence in the federal speaker series where we get the question, what do I do as an individual to combat climate change? I suspect you get that question on occasion. And what do you say?
Well, look, it's I think the one thing that we can all do, and this again is not making a political statement, but I think we can all vote, and we can vote for elected officials who take this seriously, that are not climate deniers, because I think that, because those are the people we have seen in the past, that certain things can be legislated, but things that are put in place by executive action can be undone. So we have to make sure that if we want rigorous change, we have to make sure it's part of our laws in this country. Beyond that, I think that, you know, it's the simple things. I mean, I look around and a number of people have these, you know, water is a great thing, but plastic bottles that come in, not so much. So a reusable water bottle is very simple. Not everybody can do it, but I bike to work. I try to use mass transit. I'm proud to say I'm probably the only anchor on the Today Show that has a Metro card. In fact, I was just in Denver to cover the Denver Broncos versus the 49ers. And I took the train from Denver International Airport. I'm a big light rail fan. My dad was a bus driver in New York City. So, you know, it's mass transit, you know, it's the simple things that you can do every day. Don't run the tap when you're brushing your teeth or you're shaving. I mean, just those little things all add up.
Absolutely. And that's good news you can use,
Yeah.
as you said. Can you tell us a little bit how your job has changed when you started eons ago, as you were
Yes.
noting? There was a focus on what's the weather like today, if
Right.
there was a special weather event. You got a few more people on the job, as we were talking about before the segment today, and you're getting more time
Yes.
to deliver news about the weather and climate. Can you tell us a little bit about that change from a production and work perspective?
Yeah, when I started, my first job I was a sophomore in college in upstate New York, SUNY Oswego, and I got a job doing weekend weather in Syracuse, New York, at the CBS station. And we basically had, all right. Pardon? Onondaga County, you bet. And we got our satellite imagery was a film reel that was fed down by the CBS News service that was already 12 hours old when we showed it. We put maps up on with magnets, and that was it. You know, and now we have these supercomputers that create fairly sophisticated graphics, but our job has changed, as you said. I mean, we looked out as far as 5 days ahead. That was the big deal. But now we're looking at climate, which is obviously you know, something that is long term. And as that's happened, you know, I've been very fortunate to work at a place where our management has thrown a lot of resources at it. And so our job, and what's been very fortunate is that we have a number of platforms that give us the opportunity to tell these stories. We don't just have the Today Show or NBC Nightly News, but we have MSNBC, we have NBC News Now, we have Peacock streaming television, we have CNBC, we've got Today All Day. We've got all of these platforms that allow us to go more in depth about what's happening and what's going on. And we've partnered with different groups like Covering Climate Now and Climate Connection and Climate Central, different independent climate news organizations that's really helped us create more programming and get more information out.
And in addition to the change in the media and how you have a number of more platforms, could you say a little bit about the technology? Back when you were in SUNY, that was a little more difficult to look ahead 5 days.
Yes.
And now it's a little different.
Yeah. Well, look, we end up, you know, it's kind of interesting in that we have so much of our job is now divided between the data and the presentation. You know, it's one thing to tell people a story, but if it's boring, nobody's going to listen to it. And so I think you have to, in a sense, make it compelling. So we have folks who produce graphics like this. We do this every day because I want it to be my very first news director was a guy named Andy Brigham, God rest his soul. And he said, the job of a new television newscast is to answer the two things. It's to answer the question that's foremost in our viewer's mind every day. But the other thing is to give them, and again, this is dating it, to give them something that'll make them sound really smart the next day, a piece of gee whiz information that they can share at the water cooler. I guess there are now water coolers. We can fill up our water bottles nowadays. But that's what we do with this, because we want people have so many pulls up on their attention. And so our goal is to give you the information you need, but to do it in such a compelling way that you stop and you go, oh, because they've got so many opportunities flipping through, whether it's their TV or swiping on their phone or their tablet, to stop and go, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And if it also is something that makes them think about our climate, bonus.
Yeah. And you've got a few more.
Yes. No, that's it. We're done.
That's it.
I think it's a perfect time to answer some questions. That's what I think.
Let's do it. Back in here, so I'll just repeat so folks at home can hear it. But anybody like to hop in here?
Thanks for driving in, everybody.
It's always the way.
Oh, there's somebody.
I'm just going to repeat that
yes,
for the
okay.
home audience. What
Yeah.
in your time? What's the disaster that you've seen that said to you, "This is bad. We need to make a change"?
No question. Superstorm scene. It was the closest I've come
It hit
to
home.
probably being killed, because I was on a sand dune by Point Pleasant, New Jersey, that 10 minutes after I got off of it, it gave way and the ocean rushed in, and everybody, but it literally changed the geography of coastal New Jersey. It decimated lower Manhattan, and that wasn't even a direct hit. I think and I think not just for me, but I think for the general public, especially along the eastern seaboard, I think that was, something going on here.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, well, somebody.
Sure. Sure.
Thanks.
Sure.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. This is great. One of the challenges, we see journalists face is not wanting to be arbiters of the truth, but presenters of information so people can make up their own minds. And so we end up in the situation where there's a little bit of, well, is climate change real? Let's bring in, two different folks, one saying yes, one saying no, or is it anthropogenic? Yes or no? How have you navigated through that process of trying to manage not being an advocate, but making sure that you're not also just doing both sidersism as it is?
No, we don't do the both. This isn't like an equal time issue. The science is pretty well established. I mean, any scientist of any repute will say that this is real, this is happening. So we don't deal with those who don't believe that. It's just not part of the equation. As simple as that.
Coming off of the pandemic and elections, I feel like we have a general theme of people being tired and just wanting to go about their life without worrying about major issues. So how do you, if at all, account for that in trying to keep the public alert and making change and listening?
Well, I think because this is an issue that I think affects everybody. It cuts across the board. It doesn't matter whether you're black, white, male, female, rich, poor. Unfortunately, if you're poor, it affects you much more difficultly, much more strongly. But that said, I think we try to leaven what we are talking about with solutions. We've got a piece that's coming up for a day of service for the Today Show. A bunch of us, Aaron was one, where we paired with the billion oyster project in New York Harbor, and showed how these folks are helping clean up New York Harbor and having an impact and having results. So I think that is one of the things that I think we're very good at, in that, okay, yeah, there is a problem, but here are people doing things both inside of government, outside of government, private partnerships, volunteers, that all feel pretty good about it.
I'd add to that too, from a federal sustainability perspective, a really important and necessary opportunity for us to share how many good things are happening live throughout federal government right now. So not only the extraordinarily rigorous tool that I mentioned that the Defense Department came up with to try and address these changes, but also action like when it comes to zero emission vehicles. The president gave us the mandate to go electrify the federal fleet, and in 2021, the federal government purchased about 1.5% zero emission vehicles. Fast forward to 2022, after our federal colleagues have rolled up their sleeves, leaned in with really challenging supply chain environment, they've moved that number from 1.5% to 13%. And so there's lots of good news stories that are inspiring and counter some of the really difficult realities that we see as well.
Thank you for that. And thank you for this presentation. It's been awesome. I guess the question I had, particularly given your last comment, is given where you sit, what do you think the federal government should be spending more time on? Like, how can we be more impactful in sort of addressing this set of issues in a way that could really take advantage of our platform?
And not knowing exactly how it all works, but I think at the end of the day, everything is local. So I think whatever the federal government can do to empower local governments, and by local governments, whether it's at the state, city, town, even school board level, to help push that forward, I think will go a long way. Because just as the idea of the Inflation Reduction Act being part, to be honest, I think it should be renamed lean more into the climate part of it. But I get it. I'm not telling anybody how to do their job. Certainly not until I get out of here. But I'm just saying. But I think that's where I always look back at, and again, not that I lived it, but I'm old enough to have seen what, like, say, the WPA did for this country and how it impacted, and we're still feeling those impacts. And if there was some sort of a environmental WPA, I think that would go a long way to helping push us. Yes.
Your question about you had made a point earlier about a great way to communicate with people is to kind of meet where they're at and simplify things. And it has been said that a great way of communicating is through comedy and satire. And so I was wondering if you had watched the Don't Look Up film, which, if you're not familiar with it, uses a incoming asteroid to the planet as a way of making a point about climate change and potentially some people not taking it quite as seriously. And I was wondering what your reaction was to that, if you had watched the film, any comments you might have.
Well, I watched the film. I'm not, Siskel and Ebert. So, and for those of you too young to know, they were film critics in newspapers. Wow, mind blown. I get what they were trying to do. I think they were maybe a little heavy-handed to the point where, they were bludgeoning the point. So, but that said, I appreciated what they were doing. I thought that there was an incredible amount of talent that didn't quite get the point across. But what do they care what I think?
Question in the back. And we'll take this as our last question.
My question was more about your work as a news anchor. A lot of young people are not getting their news from traditional news sources anymore. And I was wondering if you could speak to how NBC, like climate and some of the work you've done, has shifted to the forms of media that young people are consuming.
Well, we have a very robust social media presence. So we have a Snapchat show. We do stuff on TikTok. We're on the Twitter. We try to do things on the interweb. But no, we try to take what we do on legacy media and port that over. But we also do a lot of enterprise reporting for social media. And I think a lot of that is resonating with younger people. But what also is interesting, and I'm always kind of stunned when somebody your age comes up to me and says, "Oh, I watch you on," well, actually, it's my mother loves you, but obviously you must be hanging around while mom's watching, so I'll take that. But I do think that we straddle both worlds. We are very heavily invested in social media to be where people are. Our philosophy is to be where the people are, whether if it's on a screen, if it's on a, there's the glass, and so it's still TV. You may call it something else, but I call it TV because I'm old.
Thank you. And speaking of thank yous, I would like to thank Aaron and Michelle on our teams for doing the hard work to make this event happen. I'd like to thank Chair Mallory for kicking us off and leading our office in this critical issue in the White House. And we'd love to thank our special guest for your time today, your insight today, and your thoughtfulness today.
Thank you. Thank you. My honor, our honor.
Again,
Michelle's
thank
gonna
you all
close.
for being here. I hope that you've heard something that makes you smarter at the water cooler as you're walking around with your water bottle. Again, you can learn more about this event and future events on our website at sustainability.gov. And we look forward to seeing you at our next one. Thanks.